Americans' future factory jobs. Did you cover the high school stabbing? No, what? Why would I cover a stabbing in high school?
Okay, you don't like the quality then? You don't like, how about this quality?
Ooh, how about this quality? Damn.
Okay, you don't like the quality then? Nigga, you don't like, how about...
So 60 Minutes did a fantastic piece on Sunday breaking down what they were able to figure out about the
Black Twitter's arguing the stabbing is the same as a Kyle Rittenhouse situation. Okay.
men who were sent under the Alien Enemies Act to that notorious prison in El Salvador. We can put this up on the screen. So the government has not released the names of these individuals, these 238 migrants who were sent to this Salvadoran mega prison, but they were able to get their hands on some leaked government documents and dug into their purported criminal records. And what they found, because remember we were told these are gang members, these are the worst of the worst, et cetera. What they actually found is that for 75% of these Venezuelans, they had no criminal record whatsoever. There were about 13% that they were not able to determine. And for the remaining 22%, they did have criminal records, the vast majority for things like theft, shoplifting, and trespassing. At the same time, we can put these images up on the screen. They delved in particular into the case of Andrei. He is the gay makeup artist who was legally applying for asylum and was accused by the government of being a gang member based on his tattoos. They spoke to his lawyer. They also were able to track down these horrific pictures of him being sentenced into this prison for
Rare
which
is the highest
no one
quality I can get right
with
now,
him.
right?
He may be here now for life. And they also went back through his social media postings and found absolutely no indication of gang involvement whatsoever. So at the same time, the Supreme Court has issued a significant victory for the Trump administration with regards to these deportations to El Salvador. You can put this tear sheet up on the screen. They are lifting the temporary restraining order on Trump's removals under the Alien Enemies Act. However, this was a 5-4 decision. There were important dissents. What this means going forward, both for people here and for those who have already been sent to this prison, is a little bit complex. So we wanted to bring in some legal backup here. Let's go ahead and bring in Pisco. He's a YouTuber, but more importantly for our purposes, he's a lawyer, he's a litigator, and has done pro bono work in
YouTuber. That's why they're introducing him, a YouTuber?
In immigration. I've really been relying on him for his analysis of the legal challenges here. Great to have you, Pisco.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Crystal.
Yeah, of course. So let's just start with the most basic question. Was this a true win for the administration?
It was a true win for the administration. There is a core unanimous holding here that is generally good, but it's kind of something that most people take for granted, which is that people who are going to be deported are, have access to basic procedural due process. And so a unanimous Supreme Court 9-0 held that the Trump administration was violating people's procedural due process rights, or at the very least they're entitled to notice an opportunity to be heard before they're sent off to this gulag in El Salvador. But at the end of the day, the temporary restraining order, which was protecting a lot of these migrants, were in fact vacated by the Supreme Court. And that's a huge win for the Trump administration for reasons that we can get into.
So can you explain the upholding of due process? As I understand it, it is a different way that they can apply for scrutiny. There was, what was it, the Administrative Procedures Act, and instead they rule, the Supreme Court says that there must be an access to habeas corpus, but in the jurisdiction of where they're being held. So just translate the things that I just said into something a normal person can understand.
So what they said was the exclusive remedy for individuals who are labeled alien enemies under the Alien Enemies Act is to go through a habeas petition. And habeas corpus is Latin for produce the body. And it essentially, it's a specific kind of old writ that has traditionally been used in these kinds of cases where people will be allowed to challenge whether they in fact are alien enemies. And the court actually said, maybe even suggesting they could challenge the proclamation as a whole, and contrast that to the Administrative Procedures Act, which is what some of these, a remedy for a lot of these sort of agency type actions trying to strike down large agency action. And under that procedure, they could apply kind of on the general policy as opposed to an individual petition to sort of attack broad policy that the petitioners think is unlawful. And in that situation, you could file in DC. The ultimate effect of this is you're going to be funneled into all of these pro-Trump courts in Texas and Louisiana and the Fifth Circuit, where there are a lot less willing to, give these detainees the time of day than in DC or New York.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit more about this, because I think this piece is really important. Because on the one hand, you go, okay, well, they said the Trump administration can restart these deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. On the other hand, all 9 justices said, what you've been doing is illegal, because the administration's position was no due process whatsoever. Stephen Miller's been very vocal about this, Kristi Noem, et cetera. No due process. Supreme Court is saying unanimously that is not correct. You have to offer what they describe as, quote unquote, reasonable notice, an opportunity to file habeas corpus lawsuits in the jurisdictions where they are being held. Can you talk to us on like a real world practical basis what this will actually mean for immigrants who are being threatened with deportation to prison under the Alien Enemies Act, especially because, the definition of quote unquote reasonable notice, it's not like they say you have to give them a week. You have to give them even 24 hours. They're leaving it up to the administration to define what, in their view, is quote unquote reasonable notice.
Yeah, you totally hit the nail on the head. Like on the formalism of it, it totally makes sense, right? That this would be a great holding, right? They're holding that you have procedural due process rights, you have a notice to be heard, an opportunity to be heard, and you have the right to notice. Which, by the way, the Trump administration was in court arguing that we don't even need to tell their lawyers where they are. So on that basic premise, you would think, wow, it's a great holding. The problem is we're living in the real world, and the reality.
Hopefully he gets into this. You need to stress. I think it needs to be. Fuck. I don't actually even know. Never mind. Because it's just it's a complicated, fucking boring ass legal argument. But like, the government explicitly wants the process to work this way because the government was explicitly just deporting people without notice and without warning. They were effectively what they've tried to get from the court, and you could argue they've kind of sort of gotten it all. The court said, well, you do have to provide some due process shit. What they were seeking is we want you to tell us that we can basically deport somebody instantaneously without ever telling them that it's even coming. Right. That's what they were trying to argue in this case, which is abhorrent. And I think that needs to be made clear to people. This is what the government was trying to argue for, which is insane.
The situation is the Trump administration is already running the government on emergency basis. You can see this with the tariff situation where they're declaring fake emergencies and they're to invoke this limited kind of tariff authority to have these broad standing tariffs. And the same thing is true with respect to immigration, that you can't rely on this administration to be good faith about this situation and actually give them their habeas petitions that they seem to admit that they're owed, right? One of the lines that the majority of the per curiam decision relies on is the notion that the Trump administration admits that these people are allowed to have habeas petitions, but that right is meaningless if you're throwing them onto a plane and kicking them out of the country before they have a chance to like hire a lawyer or talk to their family.
Which is exactly what they were doing before.
These people probably don't have access to lawyers. Most of the people who were actually deported unlawfully, now that we know from the Supreme Court, didn't have an opportunity to have a real chance to file a petition. The problem is, of course, is the government's interpretation and the Trump administration being bad faith, and they're going to interpret reasonable to mean, who knows, a day, 30 minutes. This administration is, willing to do whatever it takes to get their agenda done. And you saw as soon as the decision came down, Stephen Miller is saying, we're starting the planes right now. We're going to deport them right away. And so that's the big problem, is that we live in the real world, and in the real world, all of these cases are going to go to Texas and the Fifth Circuit, where they're not going to be as sympathetic, and we have an administration who's not going to be inclined to give them their actual due process rights. And right now there is no order directing them not to do so. It's just like the general opinion of the court that they're not supposed to violate.
What is the practical meaning of reasonable time? Like, let's say compared to a criminal justice proceeding or a normal deportation hearing.
Yeah, when you say what the practical meaning is,
like what, obviously that's a term that is being said to the government. I assume they can interpret it to some sort of standard. What does it normally look like?
Yeah, so it's like in the law. If you've ever seen that the picture of Atlas holding up the world, and the underneath it, it's like the word reasonable. And so I can't define in strict contours what the exact amount of time is. In a typical case to respond to a complaint, it's a matter of weeks, 2-3 weeks, a month to respond to like a civil complaint or something like that. Sometimes usually a bit longer. And so I think that if you were to give these individuals some weeks, maybe a month to respond, I think that would be reasonable given the other kinds of general litigation practices that we have and the other kind of time limits. But again, is there a strict legal holding about what reasonable means in the context of removal proceedings? The government also has access to expedited removal procedures in the context of the Immigration Nationality Act, where there's not much time at all, and there's not much procedure other than a hearing before an immigration judge. And so it's a good question, and one that we need to contend with now that that's the words of the Supreme Court that the administration is left to interpret.
What does this mean for the people who already were wrongly sent to El Salvador with no due process? I mean, I just covered the 60 Minutes fantastic piece that they did, uncovering this government document, listing, okay, here's who they actually sent indefinitely into this notorious mega prison, 75% of whom zero criminal record. The administration themselves has already admitted that at least one was done in complete error. So is there any recourse for these individuals?
Is Sager not going to argue at all here? Because I feel like his positions on this are probably retarded. Does he just not argue when guests come on? To be fair, I don't know his actual positions on it. I just assume that because I know that he is retarded. So.
Who have already been sent and illegally sent at this point, according to what the Supreme Court had to say, to this prison.
It's a great point, Crystal. This, and the dissent brings this up. You should think of this opinion as dovetailing with what's happening to Mr. Abrego Garcia in the case of the individual. He's Salvadorian. He was granted withholding of removal, and the administration accepts that it was illegal to deport this individual to El Salvador, to CICOT. And you're asking what can now be done for these individuals who are already deported illegally, right? Because they weren't given their day in court, as the Supreme Court has now recognized. And the answer is this does not resolve that question. There's another petition that's going to be before the Supreme Court asking the uncomfortable question, which is once you are in the hands of a foreign government, can the court order the U.S. government to bring you back? And there are complications. I want to give you sort of the example of the Trump administration.
Well, and let me put, while you're talking, just guys, there's F5, I believe, up on the screen, which refers to the recent Supreme Court movement here with regard to this particular case, where they've now temporarily blocked the order requiring an immediate return of this wrongly deported migrant, but they haven't made an actual decision on the merits here.
So the Supreme Court issued an administrative stay. You shouldn't read too much into that decision. It's not a merits stay, which means there's no indication from where the court's going to lie ultimately on this decision. But it's important to think about this issue because it's a thorny issue. On the one hand, think of the government's perspective. Imagine that there were an order from a U.S. court that said something to the effect of, hey, you illegally sent someone over to Gaza, and now that U.S. citizen is a hostage, let's say, we're ordering you to bring him back. You can imagine how that might seem like an unwarranted intrusion into the executive prerogative to negotiate with Gaza. Or if it were think about Brittany Griner in the hands of the Russian Federation, suppose that the government is alleged to do something illegal that brought about that situation, and a district court somewhere just orders the United States to bring them back out of Russian detention. That could seem like a crazy standard to allow all these courts to intrude into the executive prerogatives. So you have to understand the government's perspective there. But the difference here, and what I think is the right outcome, and why the Fourth Circuit did not get rid of this district court order to bring Mr. Abrego Garcia back, is this is not like those situations. This is very much like a contracting relationship. The U.S. government is hiring, the El Salvadorian president to essentially operate immigration detention on the U.S. government's behalf. And based on their statements and the fact that the U.S. government is not willing to say that they can't bring him back, it seems obvious who's in control here, who has the power here, and that the U.S. government, if they wanted to, could absolutely bring Mr. Abrego Garcia back. And it's shocking that they have admitted that he is illegally removed to El Salvador, but they haven't even tried to bring him back at all, or even state that they couldn't. They're just saying that we don't have to, and we don't have to listen to any court that says we do.
What about on the merits of the Alien Enemies Act yourself? You said that they had not ruled on that, and that these future people could be able to challenge that. What does the landscape look like with respect to that as a result of this court decision?
As Crystal laid out, a lot of these people have really good factual cases for not, in fact, being alien enemies. The proclamation declaring the or invoking the Alien Enemies Act said that you had to be a member of Tren de Aragua. The president actually limited the scope of what the proclamation could be if he wanted to, and if it were a valid invocation, he could target every single Venezuelan, including green card holders, but he limited himself to Tren de Aragua members. And so a lot of these individuals will have good factual cases to challenge whether or not they're, in fact, alien enemies. There's an additional legal question, which is this even a valid invocation of the Alien Enemies Act at all? Which is, can you consider Tren de Aragua a foreign country? Or if they're not a foreign country, are they actually in cahoots with the Venezuelan government? Because you need that link to a foreign government. And then the additional question of, are they invading the United States? Or are they threatening to invade the United States? Or are they having a physical incursion into the United States? And so there are two kind of substantive merits legal questions, which are the fundamentals of the proclamation itself related to whether this is all fake. And obviously it's all fake. There's no actual physical invasion into the territory of the United States by Tren de Aragua. And then there's the related question of, are the people actually designated, assuming the proclamation is valid, actually alien enemies? And the, sort of the reporting that Crystal pointed to, it seems that many of them are not. There's someone with they were just picked up because of their tattoo, someone with a tattoo for their autistic brother, someone with a tattoo, who's a gay barber, who obviously is not a member of the Nicaragua by all reporting. And so those are merits determinations that are now going to be made much harder because they have to be individualized. There's not kind of a broad class action challenge. And so they've made it more difficult, but hopefully. So
even that determination on the whether or not the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act itself, that has to start on an individual basis with these habeas petitions? Is that what I'm hearing you to say? So
if a court, like an appellate court, held that the invocation or proclamation was invalid, people, and they had like direct appellate overview of whatever court system they were, most like the Fifth Circuit, it would have precedential effect, and the effect would be that more courts would deny the validity of the proclamation. One of the problems with doing all these individualized petitions is you could start to see divergent case law or something like that. So the end result might be that this might all be funneled into one on the actual proclamation itself.
Gotcha.
But it would have to start there. It couldn't start with this like kind of large case.
Gotcha. And my last question for you is, Pisco, I watched some of your stream last night, which was very helpful, by the way. And everybody should go subscribe to Pisco's Hour, which I've really been enjoying. Glad to see your growth over there.
Holy fuck.
But you mentioned that you thought Roberts might be kind of playing politics here, like thinking, okay, I'm going to give the administration some W's here. So maybe I build some credibility. So later on, if we have to give them some L's, that'll have more, purchase because we gave them things that they wanted earlier on. I've also been thinking about the fact, this is an administration that is at least playing with outright defiance of court orders. And so if you're the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, you want your institutions still to matter. So maybe you're thinking about I really should go along with as much as I can so that I don't end up in a situation where he does blatantly defy a court order, and then all of our purported power is just done. It's over. So what are you thinking? What is your analysis in that regard? And one last note, which I also thought was interesting, conservatives were very upset about the fact Amy Coney Barrett actually joined the liberals on the dissent, which was also noteworthy here. And also there was a lot of gender dynamics at play there, since you had all the women on one side and all the men on the other side. But in any case, if you could lay out your analysis of what you think might be going on with some of the John Roberts politics here.
Yeah, I get that impression because, first of all, there's inside reporting that Roberts is concerned about the legitimacy of the court. And so there's direct reporting talking about that's his state of mind. He released that statement about Judge Boasberg, who issued the opinion, the district court. And that, how do you interpret that other than sort of a signaling political act? And so the fact that he's saying, hey, we shouldn't impeach this judge, the proper course to complain about overreach by the court and about whether or not you're defining orders is to repeal. And by the way, the defying orders portion of this is very much still at play. Just because the order was ultimately deemed invalid because there was no jurisdiction doesn't mean that you still don't have an obligation to follow that order. But that it was inherently sort of a political signaling act to defend the legitimacy of the court. And so I see Judge Roberts as very much concerned about that based on reporting, based upon his statements, and based upon these decisions. And the same thing with Trump versus United States, where they're always trying to split the baby, have a kind of middle ground approach, which is not giving a full win to Trump, and where the opinion seems completely untailored to precedent and completely preposterous in view of the actual real world. Think about the Trump versus United States case, where he's really putting blinders on and not realizing that justice delayed, is justice denied with respect to what happened in the January 6 cases. So that seems to be his approach, from what I can gather and my intuition about it, and based on the reporting that we're seeing. And I think it's a dangerous game because these Trump, sycophants, the administration officials are not going to be loyal to you, or not going to respect you anymore just because you've issued a couple middle ground decisions. And I think it's one that he's walking. It's also one of the reasons why I think you shouldn't read into too much of the administrative stay into the Mr. Abrego Garcia case, because in that situation, I feel like one of the reasons why he might issue an administrative stay is to, if he were going to rule on the right side, in my opinion, trying to get Mr. Abrego Garcia back, would be to gather a consensus, to actually have an opinion. If there's going to have to be a standoff between the courts and the president, have it be with the Supreme Court as opposed to the Fourth Circuit. And so I very much see him in the game of trying to protect the legitimacy of the court and the institution, but I just think that he's off the mark.
I do have one last, legal question for you, Pisco. There was a question of whether or not the administration did defy court orders with regard to, the judge had said, even if you have to turn the planes around, this cannot go forward. They did not turn the planes around. They say the planes were gone, so we couldn't do anything, or we didn't want to do anything. We didn't have to do anything. And there were hearings continuing to determine whether they should be held in contempt for defiance of those orders. Does this wipe that out? Is that still ongoing? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, no, you're supposed to follow court orders, even if ultimately it's determined that the court was not right in the initial instance to issue the order. And that's very much, by the way, true. The holding of this court is that Boasberg did not have the jurisdiction, did not have the right venue to issue these orders. But that doesn't mean that you're not still obligated to follow that order. And so this does not eliminate the contempt proceedings and the hearings that are occurring before Boasberg about whether or not, in fact, they violated the order. To me, it's completely obvious that they violated the order. I mean, they're all but bragging about it. And if you look at the timeline about when the order was given, it was an oral order, but there's nothing less binding about an oral order. They're completely aware about the existence of the order. Boasberg is talking and asking who, even up to the individual lawyers, was aware of what's going on. So he's doing some fact finding there, but they knew about it. They knew they were supposed to turn the planes around. And it's preposterous, the notion that courts could not order a plane to turn around if it had, for example, U.S. citizens on board and they were trying to abscond illegally, which is also one of the reasons why all these decisions are very problematic, is because they apply at their maximal also to U.S. citizens, that they couldn't, give that order. The order wasn't valid. And at this point, they're not even trying to hide their defiance. They're invoking the state secret doctrine when they're blatantly posting the times of when it landed, and where the president of El Salvador is memeing over the orders and flouting them. And so to me, there's no question really about the defiance, and the dissent all but accuses them of flagrant disrespect for the rule of law and the judge's order.
Will we see a resolution of that at the court, or is that a Boasberg contempt? Would it stay within his jurisdiction?
It could definitely be appealable, and I expect this administration appeals everything, and so I would always expect them to appeal it. They're supposed to give deference to the factual findings of the lower court. That's one of the principles here. But they're also not supposed to appeal TROs, and there's not supposed to be jurisdiction to the Supreme Court or for any appellate court to hear a kind of disagreement on a TRO. But there's always seems to be special rules when the president's involved, special rules when Trump is involved. And so I don't know if they're going to pay deference to Judge Boasberg's findings. And I very much expect them to appeal the order and for them to say that it's invalid if he finds, for example, that they violated the court order, to say that that finding is not applicable as to the president. I don't think the president himself is involved, but as to the other officials.
Right.
And so yeah, I don't think it'll be finally resolved in the district court, even though they're supposed to pay deference to those factual findings.
I didn't know that.
All right. Well, this has been very illuminating. Thank you so much for taking some time to break these issues down for us, Pisco. Great to see you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much, guys.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like,
Let's move on to Iran.
so 60 Minutes did a
Okay, well. I thought we were gonna have some fighting. Catherine Rampell was on the Al Franken podcast. Bro, what the fuck? Every single politician person has a podcast these days now?
Before, after, before, after.
Oh God, come on. Okay. Come on, let's go. He's gonna blab too much too. Hi everyone, this is Pivot from New York Magazine, the Vox Media Podcast Network. I'm Kara Swisher in my new studio, without books behind me, but they will have them. Here I am, Scott.
Oh my God, could you be any
How do I
more?
look?
You're apologizing for not having books behind you.
Well, I'm gonna have awards. My many awards is what I'm gonna have. Yeah.
Okay,
Do you like my
good.
new studio? It's in my house.
I'm not sure I like the red chair, quite frankly.
Really? Why? Does it upset you? Does it threaten you?
No, it takes me back to an era. I think you've moved on. I think you've turned the page on the red chair.
We'll see. I like it for now. I'm gonna leave it because it
Yeah.
upsets you. Upsets and disturbs you.
Yeah.
You mean it's like retro, or that it reminds you of Walt Mossberg, who I just had lunch with?
No, I love Walt. I just think you've moved on. I don't know.
What?
Are we just in full react mode for a while? Do you have any plans for action the community can rally behind these coming weeks? I can't rally or do anything until my court case is over. So yes, we're just waiting here until the other side gets dismissed. Is basically that's what we're doing. It's jerking off, hanging out. Yes.
Color chair should I have with you in the Scott era?
Plaid. No, I don't know. Black.
I'm
full
gonna put
black.
your blanket that I stole from the Fife Arms for your birthday.
Oh, good. That'd be nice.
I'll put that on. Okay.
Okay.
Next. All right. I'll drape it. I'll drape a Scottish thing on it. And
No, I
take
think it reminds us how old you are. But anyways,
literally right out of the gate. Go
right
ahead.
out of the gate.
Go ahead.
Hello.
You were on your college tour. Tell me, but you were away last week. We
Yeah.
had lovely guest hosts with Jen Psaki and John Lovett. They were great.
Jen Psaki, those are both great.
They are great. They were
I'd
very
like to be
lively.
friends with both of them. I'd be fun to roll with.
We'll see about that. We'll
No,
check. I'll check with them. We'll call you.
She's interesting and attractive, and he's interesting.
Wow, Kappa TTV. Thanks for subbing, buddy.
Yeah. Really? Okay.
Sorry, John.
Anyway,
Who's the handsome one? Who's the
all
handsome
of them.
one?
Oh,
No,
John
no.
Favreau is who you're
Oh,
thinking
he's
about.
dreamy.
Yeah.
That dude's dreamy.
I think
Do you
John.
care? Let's give a possible date when the court shows final. I don't know, a month, 2 months, 3 months. It's just waiting for the complaint is bullshit because there are things on the complaint that are factually incorrect. The other side knows that they're factually correct. Their dream is to get to some discovery phase so that they can go dig through all of my DMs in the hopes that they're going to find something that will allow them to salvage it. They're not going to find anything like that. And then once that happens, then we file a motion for summary judgment, and then it goes away because it's it's just a matter of waiting for the process until then, basically. I think right now we're in the process of fighting over a preliminary injunction that their side wants to get me to stop hosting a whole bunch of videos online, even though I'm obviously not hosting any fucking videos online. That's why they tried to file a TRO. Judge made fun of them because they took too long to file it. It was fucking retarded. So now we're doing the preliminary injunction thing, and then after that we'll be doing the fucking. We're just waiting, basically. It's all a good meme. Fun times.
It's adorable.
Yeah, he's good looking.
He was on Survivor. Do you know he was on the show Survivor?
He was on Survivor.
Yeah, he
He's
didn't
way
survive.
too smart and overthought. He's out in the second round.
Yeah, he
doesn't-
was out
That
pretty
guy's
quick,
too.
I think. I don't
That
watch
guy's. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm voting John off the island. Okay,
Yeah.
college tour. Back to me.
A college tour. Tell me about the college tour, because I really don't want to talk about White Lotus in any way.
So
But you were
8
great.
schools in 5 days. 7.
You should read the executive order, not surprising, but the rationale is wild. Bro, we're so past. The rationale for every EO and everything this admin is doing is fucking insane.
Straight days of full parenting, cleared everything, didn't talk to anybody. I only talked to you once, if that. And it was about the college tour. We went to, I like to personify everything, and just so I can make sure my kid gets into none of them, I'll personify each of them. So the first one we did was UW.
Do you think they're purposefully delaying at filing? They're not really delaying at filing. It's just a long process. I think they want me to settle something, but obviously I'm not doing that because this whole thing is fucking retarded. so now we just are running through the fucking process of everything. And I think they have like they've got like some Hail Mary prayer of finding some magical thing in discovery, which is equally retarded. So,
University of Wisconsin-Madison. Yeah, when I was at UCLA, the fraternity next to mine was the Phi Caps. And the Phi Caps are basically these white dudes from small towns who abused substances who did really well on the SAT.
Okay.
That is the University of Wisconsin-Madison, except it's a girl who wears too much makeup, who really likes makeup. And, but they're doing their job. Actually, UW-Madison, I rag a lot on higher education. They're doing their job. They let in a shit ton of kids.
Yeah.
It's crowded. They have money, but it's not the Ritz-Carlton, Madison. They get it. They got the assignment. I felt really good. I actually met with someone there just Second Virtue Signal. They do this amazing program where they train prisoners, or they they do classes at local prisons. I'm giving some money to it. They're doing their job. I was really impressed with them.
So you like them, but you just insulted them, so your son's not getting in there now. But go ahead, move along.
There you go. Thanks for that. And then we went to Chicago. Chicago's a dude.
University of, that's
Yeah, UChicago. I did a session there in the Institute of Politics with David Axelrod.
He's great.
Yeah, which is available on YouTube. And imagine a guy in a park. They're one of two things. They either win a Nobel Prize. Everyone who goes there either wins a Nobel Prize or ends up in a park without shoes, feeding pigeons and speaking to themselves. I mean, these people are, I can't imagine people I would rather not party with than anyone who went to the University of Chicago. Having said that, anyone that interviews with me that went to the University of Chicago, automatic hire, because they're self-hating, they work all the time, they're brilliant, mildly depressed, perfect employees. Perfect employees.
Let's move it through. Okay, keep going.
Northwestern.
Okay.
This is the gay son we all want.
Oh, okay.
This is
You should write a college to our book.
this is stylish, impressive,
Yeah.
good in theater, but also like takes AP everything and does well. And it's the most, there is clearly so much money there. It is such a beautiful campus.
It is.
But the lake is just sitting there going, oh, bitch, I'm going to make it so cold about 3 months a year. You
All
may
months
think,
a year.
oh my God, you can just
Yes.
feel the wind. You can feel
it's cold.
Mother Winter in the
cold.
wear going,
Chicago's
oh,
cold,
just
Jen.
wait and see what I'm going to do to you. Then we went to Michigan.
And saw my son.
Your son is Michigan.
oh shit, that guy joined the call. My browser or my computer over here was muted. I'm sorry. If he was talking to me, I didn't hear him.
Michigan personified.
Oh, no. You better be careful.
No.
Because he loves you. And I'm his
No,
mom.
imagine you're a power forward and work all the time and a nice kid, and you also get 11 million on the SAT. They're like, these kids are. Michigan is one of the schools. It's arguably the best public school in the nation, maybe tied with Berkeley. But you can go super deep on social, or you could literally try and split the atom at the building next to the cafeteria.
Yeah.
All right, hi, what's up, buddy?
Sorry, my mic wasn't working. Just, I saw you were watching the Pisco video on breaking points. There was something at the end there I wanted to address about. They asked him about the contempt orders that the judge could find, violation of the TRO. There can no longer be contempt orders found for violation of the TRO because the TRO is vacated. So it doesn't matter if they violated it or not. Technically,
Wait, there's no way that can't possibly be the procedure.
Well, what would they be violating?
The
if there was a
TRO.
violation. But the TRO is vacated.
Yeah, but it wasn't when they violated it,
vacating
no?
of the Sure, but in this case, the way that it would work is that if they tried to do it to apply contempt, they say, well, that was vacated. And I understand what Pisco is saying, where you're supposed to follow it at the time that it happens, but the contempt would be overturned essentially for.
If that was the case, then
because
you
of
should
the-
never follow any TRO basically ever in the hopes that you eventually overturn it, no?
Going forward, sure. In the past, though, when would you ever? No lawyer could tell their client, "We can violate it because we'll take it to the Supreme Court," because you could never take these to the Supreme Court. You know, like, I guess you are
Well,
correct.
if there's a novel case there,
I
then-
don't know because this has never happened.
Sure.
But like
yeah, I think
operation of law wise,
you still must be able to be held in contempt, because the contempt isn't for like whether or not the contempt is just you're violating a court order, right? Like if I get arrested by a cop and I run away, I end up breaking out of the car and I run away, and eventually I win the case. I can't say like, well, it doesn't matter that I broke out of being arrested. Like I was never found guilty of a crime, right? I could still be charged with any crimes associated with fleeing a detention or whatever. No.
sure. Like that in this hypothetical scenario, sure. But I'm just saying that most are saying most are arguing that, like everyone I've seen talking about it, which to be fair, it's only been 2 or 3 people, they are saying because of this now, Boasberg, he might be able to find them in contempt for other actions, such as their behavior in court, but the plane taking off after his oral order and not returning likely is a lot of people are saying that contempt is almost certainly off the table at this point for that. It would have to be specifically for attorney actions and for like refusal to answer questions in court. So those things aren't tied to the TRO technically.
Sure.
They are just their actions. So just
I guess we'll see how that goes. But I mean, like I think you should obviously be able to do something about that. Otherwise, you've created a world where now the federal government can probably, if they feel like, I mean, like the level of hypothetical corruption there, I feel would just be really, really, really bad.
Yeah, it already exists. Now just the Supreme Court's just kind of underwriting it, right? They're just kind of saying, actually, yeah, it's fine. Which is also why a lot of people are upset about it. I have had time to read the order and the dissents now. There's just too small. I've made a post about things that I updated, but mostly what we talked about last night was mostly accurate. That was just the one thing in there that I agree with you that it sounds fucked because I agree they should still be held accountable for doing that, but the legal scholars that I've seen discuss it have said that actually contempt is off the table. So just updating.
I'm curious what their arguments would be, considering these are novel situations that we don't have anybody appealing a TRO, which I feel like is still oxymoronic.
Sure.
So yeah.
Sure, and I think that I think they're trying to just base it off of like kind of how the contempt would work. So if they did, if you were going to do like a criminal contempt specifically, I think that's where they're mostly looking at, because remember, criminal contempt is for punishment of actions, but if you've been vindicated for that action later, right, then the punishment is much harder to punish them for. And then civil contempt is to compel behavior, but you can't compel behavior if that TRO doesn't exist anymore. So if he tried now to come and say, well, I'm going to do civil contempt for you violating that, he can't do it because he can't compel them to do that action. If he says, well, I'm going to punish you for that action, whenever they go to a criminal trial, these people are arguing that they would say, well, that TRO was vacated, so you can't punish us for a vacated TRO. And I think that you are making compelling arguments, and were I a judge in that criminal contempt case,
Well, let me carry it this way. Okay, let's say that a TRO gets issued, and I think it's bullshit, and let's say that I successfully defend against a preliminary injunction, and I violated the TRO up to the preliminary injunction. Can I just say, oh, well, you can't hold me in anything for the TRO because they lost on the injunction, and now that's basically vacated anyway, right? It feels like at that point, like TROs just become worthless, no? Or would this not? Or do you think that would not apply here?
No, I think that's a very good hypothetical to put into place. I think that if I was, I will need to read more. I'm sorry, everybody in chat started hearing me say that, but I can look into that and give you a better answer. But out of the gate, the way that those hearings go is, let's say there was a TRO. I've got to stop, encroaching on someoe's property.
Sure.
And I keep doing it, and then I show up and I argue at the preliminary injunction that was BS and it shouldn't have happened that way. I think that in that scenario, the only way that I'm winning there is by showing that there was no imminent harm, even though the judge believed it, and I'm showing that the other side doesn't have a likelihood of succeeding on the merits.
Sure, which is fine though, because that can happen because the TRO is definitionally ex parte, and at a preliminary injunction, now the other side can present some arguments. So I'm sure there have been I'm sure there have been billions of TROs that have not survived the preliminary injunction stage, but that doesn't mean that you didn't have to ever follow the TRO, no?
Well, actually, I think this is the answer that I would feel most comfortable saying, and actually it favors your interpretation over mine, would be that if you don't follow the TRO, but take every measure to get to the preliminary injunction hearing as fast as possible to prove your case, but in that, let's say it was like 1 hour even, and you were able to prove the case and show it and you didn't comply with the TRO, I think that there's a very strong argument that any violation of the TRO should not be punished, right? Where you're taking all best efforts to overturn the TRO without complying to it. I think that would. I think anything beyond that, I'm not comfortable staking a position on. And I don't think that supports the government's case here. They have arguments, but I think they have bad arguments. But I agree with you that it feels unsatisfying, but I think one, it's that this is novel and that the TROs aren't designed to be appealed. So whenever you see a vacating of a TRO like this, it kind of triggers these kind of weird interactions because again, like if someone violates a preliminary injunction, right? That preliminary, even and then that's later vacated, right? I think that then the issue is there is that you can do contempt because it's a continuing action, I believe is what they were saying, whereas the TRO is supposed to end, things like that. They got very into the nitty gritty of it, like this kind of operation.
Yeah, because I feel like because you were basically I feel like you were getting to the point there where you're saying like you could just ignore a whole preliminary injunction if you win the case, because then obviously the preliminary injunction isn't in effect anymore. But
yes, because the issue here is that
because also keep in mind too that like a defendant is not a competent body to evaluate the worthiness of a TRO, right? This is exclusively within the paradigm of the judiciary to decide. So for a defendant to take it upon themselves to essentially self-vacate a TRO with the hopes that they win at the preliminary injunction, or if they lose there to win the case, and then all of a sudden none of the contempt mattered, just seems...
Right, but if you're saying that if the TRO is being vacated because the judge never had the jurisdiction to issue such a TRO, then why is this person being punished for?
Yeah, but as per
not listening to a judge's jurisdiction?
Well, who has the? Well, but I mean, then you can sue the state or sue the federal government, I guess, if you feel like you've been wronged in some way. But I mean, it's not up to you to make that jurisdictional argument, right? Because in that case, I could murder somebody and then go get brought to court. I'm like, well, actually, I'm a sovereign citizen. You don't have jurisdiction to hear my case. Now I get to decide that. Like, that's not up for you to decide. No.
Well, right, but then on the backside of that, then if the defendant is wrong there, then the judge and the court has the ability to do something about it because they do have the jurisdiction. This is an issue between the judge and a party, not between two parties. So what we're saying is, okay, once it's vacated, we come back to the judge. What grounds does the judge have to do to get here? Can he punish them for an action that now can't be proven in a criminal court case because it's been vacated? Essentially, it undermines the entire criminal contempt case because it was vacated later. And then two, he can't compel them because it no longer exists to compel him. So it's this kind of what are the judge's powers here, and how can he use them with a vacated TRO? That's the problem. And I agree that we are in this kind of weird space. But let's say then that ultimately the person was harmed. Okay, let's say I didn't follow a preliminary injunction or TRO, and the other side is harmed because of it. Okay, we go through the entire case. Okay, and the other side wins. They can now come to me and get damages or an injunction in a different way. The only difference.
Well, careful,
is that
they literally can't get damages, kind of, right? Now you have to go to compensatory or secondary, because the whole point of the TRO was that you're going to be damaged in a way that you can't recover that after the case is over, even if you do win. So now you're like super fucked, right?
Well, right, but if a court decides, oh, you actually aren't going to be damaged in a way that's irreparable, that like a vacated TRO or preliminary injunction, by definition, means that the court believes that the damages in some way are not so imminent that they can't be recovered later, or at least that has not been shown enough to warrant it. So that means the court is saying,
there's two things. It could be that they believe there would be irreparable harm, but they don't think that you're likely to succeed on the merits such that they would grant a TRO as well, right? That could be the case too.
Sure, but in that case too, you're still not entitled to a TRO. And it's like if it turns out, oh, oops, the court made the wrong determination because you won a 1 in a million case, then the court shouldn't. Then you haven't been harmed here, okay, necessarily by the court. The court made a decision, and it just so happened that you won, even though the court thought you'd lose. It's not quite judicial economy, but it's close to it.
Sure.
Where they're saying
real quick on the TRO thing too, for a TRO to be granted, the likelihood to succeed on the merits that are presented have to be pretty big. Like it's at least 51%, right? It's not like it's exceptional. Like if you win, right? They would be like a TRO shouldn't be granted in over half of all cases, right?
And sorry for being pedantic.
Yeah, you're good.
In a TRO, you don't need to show that. That is only considered by judges because they expect a preliminary injunction. In a TRO, you only need to show imminent harm or that the case cannot be heard unless it's put in place. But But preliminary injunctions do require that, and so most judges will consider that for TRO as well. And you're right, it needs to be. I have heard, no one has a line in the sand. I've heard some people say, the 51, but I've heard a lot more people say closer to 80, 90%. Like I've even had some people, and it depends on the area of law. It depends on a huge number of things. You know, I mean, like if you're in a domestic violence situation or an alleged one, especially with children involved, you might not even need to get to 50%. Like it's like whenever you're in things like that, if it's someone that could become a ward of the state, it drops a lot really low. If you're a super big company that, you know, you might lose 1% of your income, blah blah blah, right? Then it's almost impossible.
Okay,
So
I gotcha.
it's super dependent on that. But yeah, I know it's unsatisfactory to hear, but unfortunately, like that is where a lot of people are going down on. Also, I mean, it is kind of pie in the sky. If Boasberg wasn't going to do contempt before, he's certainly not going to do it now with the Supreme Court, like putting their finger on the scale. So, sorry for the distraction from everything.
No, you're good. Okay.
All right.
All right. Love you. Be careful.
Right.
You could go deep either way.
Yeah.
I think Michigan, and it's a big school. I like.
I don't care about this guy's
it's
kids.
2 Republicans, but the governor's a great guy.
Yeah.
The governor's really impressive.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop your college tour because we're done.
Anyways, that's my college
Good.
tour.
I'm glad.
Next week.
We're glad you're back. All right. We have a lot to. By the way, when you were gone, things happened, my friend. Lots of
Really?
things
The world
happened.
kept spinning?
The world did not keep spinning. The world is crashing. We're on a. Let's get right in.
Okay.
U.S. markets are on a roller coaster as we record Monday morning, following an epic 2-day dive last week. Epic in a bad term that destroyed $6 trillion in market value thanks to Donald Trump's tariffs, which seem like inane in the way they were formulated. U.S. stocks tumbled at the opening bell today, briefly surged following a report that Trump was considering a 90-day pause, which many are suggesting to him, including Jamie Dimon and others from bankers and other people. The White House quickly called that report fake news, and the current Dow, S&P 500 are currently back in the red. So a lot of volatility, to say the least. Who knows what Trump will do? In fact, he seems to be sticking by his guns. We'll get to winners and losers from these tariffs a little later, but we've been seeing Goldman Sachs has raised the odds of a U.S. recession to 45%. As Larry Summers put it, this is the biggest self-inflicted wound we put on our economy in history. In terms of retaliation, China was quick to respond, imposing a 34% tariff on all goods imported from the U.S. starting on April 10th. Trump said he's going to impose an additional 50% on China if they don't drop that 34% increase. The EU is, and of course, the TikTok deal went out the window. The EU is expected to present a united front in the coming days with a set of targeted countermeasures. Let me read a couple more things. This retaliation moves. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who looks unhappy, said over the weekend that more than 50 countries have started negotiations with the U.S. since the tariff announcement, whatever, probably like the penguins maybe. Though Trump also said, my policies will never change. I'll get to, well, I'm just going to, Howard Lutnick, who seems like the biggest clown of all besides Peter Navarro, which are the two faces of this, also offered his take on how tariffs will lead to a manufacturing resurgence in the U.S. on Face the Nation. This quote, I literally was like, this is the dumbest person I've ever met. So let's go. Let's listen to that, and then we'll get some reaction from you.
Well, remember, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing is going to come to America. It's going to be automated, and great Americans, the trade craft of America.
Wait, did we listen to him say this? Is that a good thing? Did he really say this? Did we listen to this one? The army of millions of people with little screws. Okay.
Kind of thing is going to come to America. It's going to be.
Let's go. Let's listen to that, and then we'll get some reaction from you.
Well, remember, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing is going to come to America. It's going to be automated, and great Americans, the trade craft of America, is going to fix them, is going to work on them. They're going to be mechanics. There's going to be HVAC specialists. There's going to be electricians. The trade craft of America, our high school educated Americans, the core to our workforce is going to have the greatest resurgence of jobs in the history of America to work on these high-tech factories, which are all coming to America.
He's an idiot. I don't know what else to say. The screws, the robots, whatever you say. Let's have a first reaction, because then, and last thing, sorry, Mark Cuban said one thing the tariffs are going to spur is smuggling, a resurgence. Mark Cuban said that and noted that maybe that's what the Border Patrol money is used for. So reaction.
Well, let's just talk about Apple. Americans don't want to go into a factory and screw in little screws. Americans don't even want to put on a hazmat suit and go to a regular factory. This notion that Americans are dying to go back to an assembly line is just not true. You can't get Americans to work on a construction site. Do you think they're going to show up for assembly line work? So let's talk specifically about Apple. iPhone costs about $1,200 or $1,300. With the existing tariffs, they're going to $2,000. If we tried to produce them in the U.S., they'd be $3,500. They're not. So first off, they're not coming back here, and all that's going to happen is the following. Fewer people are going to buy fewer iPhones. It'll reduce Apple revenues by $30 to $40 billion, say economists. It trades at 8 times revenue, so you're going to wipe out $1/3 trillion. You're going to have 401ks go down. You're going to have people be less confident buying things. You're going to have Apple employees and shareholders lose a lot of wealth. You're going to have, I mean, we're not even talking about the second tier effects, and that is, one, we are thrusting people into the arms of China, and two, assume it just goes tit for tat. And let's stop talking. We know tariffs are bad. Let's assume that we reduce $1 billion of Samsung sales, right? I'm trying to think of an analog to Apple. And Apple sales go down $1 billion. Samsung trades at like 1.2 to 2 times revenues. Apple trades at 8. So you think, okay, it's bad, but we each lose $1 billion in revenue and sales through prices or products that are less competitive because they're more expensive. No, we lose $8 billion in market cap. They lose 2. So the biggest beneficiary of global trade over the last 30 or 40 years has been the U.S. because the products we export are high margin, high value add manufactured products. We're the second biggest manufacturer in the world. But what we do is we take cheap oil from Canada, we refine it, we take cheap products from other nations in earth minerals, and we turn them into very expensive 55-point margin NVIDIA chips.
And services.
So Tesla, another example. Toyota, really well-run company, trades at 0.7 times revenue. Tesla trades at 8 times revenue. So for every $1 billion in reductions in trade of Tesla, we lose $8 billion in market cap. They lose $77 million. So the echo effect here is so dramatic. And even beyond that, you're going to see, in my view, over the next 5 years, a pretty serious destruction in the value of our stock markets. And it's for the following reasons. The U.S. market trades at a PE multiple of 28 until Wednesday night. Now it's down to 26. Germany is at 22 or 23, Japan at 18, China at 14. Now, why do our companies trade at a higher value for the same earnings, the same profits as companies in other nations? It's because we have this umbrella called the U.S. brand, and it means a lot of things. It means risk-aggressive capital. It means entrepreneurship. It means great universities, great IP. It means immigration. It means rule of law and consistency. We're seen as a consistent trading partner. China doesn't have rule of law. They can put companies out of business right away. They can disappear people. Germany doesn't have as much risk capital. They're not as aggressive. The U.S. is losing or has lost 2 things. Rule of law. We've now decided to basically ignore court orders. We're doing one-offs and companies that make no sense. We're deporting people to El Salvador for no reason at all. In addition, we're no longer seen as consistent. The epileptic sclerotic decisions of this guy. So what are you going to have? You're going to have a re-rating of the S&P down from 26 to maybe 15. And here's the thing. All of our companies could continue to outperform the rest of companies around the world, and their stocks are still going to go down.
Yeah.
If you invested in Latin American stocks, it didn't matter how well the company did. You cannot outrun multiple contraction, which is going to happen over the next 5 years.
So in a lot of the things is one 70-year-old point out correctly, like it's deciding on this one person who has a wrong math and the wrong idea between trade deficits and tariffs and the relationship. Every single thing he's saying is actually wrong, and has this thing in his head that everything has to equal out, that if they buy this, we sell that. Like we have to sell exactly, like why don't they, and Stephen Miller, same thing. Why don't they buy American cars? Because Toyotas are better, you dumbass, and they make them here too. Like the stupidity is outranked only by the, as you were saying, the rule of law, the lack of any consistency, the reliability of the U.S. One, what has to happen here? What do you imagine is going to happen here? Because there's now suddenly Jamie Dimon is speaking, but Bill Ackman has suddenly found his balls again and is saying something truthful, although he made sure he sucked up to Trump in the beginning of his screed, which was about a nuclear winter in investing, essentially, or in the U.S. economy. What's your advice to people that are panicking right now and trying to figure out what to do their investments? And then second, first, what do you think is going to happen? And what's your advice for people if it continues in this way?
I feel more confident answering the latter than the former. I can't predict Donald Trump's actions. I think he is so... Look, the only adult in the cabinet here that isn't on unsecure phones and apps.
The only adult in the cabinet. Who is he going to say? I hate to say it, but I feel like it's Rubio, but he has nothing to do with trade. Is he going to say Besson? Because Besson is a full fucking Trump dick suck now too. Is he going to... But...
Releasing attack plans to the rest of the world and who has any understanding of economics. I've said this for a long time. The adult in the room is the Dow, the 10-year, and the NASDAQ.
Oh, he's never mind. Metaphorically. My bad.
And if the NASDAQ keeps going down, they're probably going to have to respond. They're not going to be able to jazz hands their way out of this. The argument they're making is the following, is that sometimes the market doesn't represent the real economy. That's actually a relatively good argument. The Dow Jones and NASDAQ are dangerous.
There's a difference between, though, I don't know why I'm saying this first. There's a difference between something isn't fully representative of the economy versus something is completely and totally untethered to the economy. These are 2 different things.
Indicators, because they give a false signal of prosperity. And a lot of people aren't impacted by the markets. They're impacted by things like inflation. The problem is if you were to take minimum wage to $25 an hour, or you were to increase taxes on corporations to try and have some fiscal sanity, that would take the markets down, but that would be an investment that would be worth it. This is just making products more expensive, making our products less competitive overseas and convincing the rest of the world to reconfigure the supply chain to not include American businesses or professionals. That's just shooting yourself in the foot and then taking your gun and putting it in your mouth. So, but I have no idea what he's going to do. I just don't get it. I think if this gets much worse, he's probably going to do some bullshit like, so for example, Jamie Dimon's suggestion, that's even worse because it's the uncertainty that hurts more than the tariffs.
What's going to do at 90
We're going to do
days,
that.
right?
We're going to pull another TikTok. It's just, for God's sakes, we'd be better off if he just came up with some sort of, not this tariff level, but some sort of modest tariff and let people plan their business. It's the uncertainty and the unpredictability. It's like being in a relationship with someone who's bipolar, speaking for a friend. You don't know who you're waking up next to.
Also, it's incorrect. One of the people who they base the theories on has written a piece in the New York Times saying they got this totally wrong and they did the math wrong and it's a quarter. What they should put here is a quarter of what I said. You know, I said a quarter of what they're doing here, which means they don't know how to do math. That's the part that's frightening. They actually don't understand what they've done, like pushing them.
Okay, quick on that note. We'll do a quick math break, I guess, because somebody linked this.
In short, this equation, derived and published by the Trump administration, combined with their own numbers, nothing to do with me or anyone else, predicts that there will be over 10% inflation on all goods imported into the US as paid by US consumers. Their numbers, their equation. Let me explain.
I'd like to see the chart if you have it. I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. Thanks a lot, Eric. I think you better take it with you. It's not going to last very long.
2 days ago, Trump had a big press event to celebrate Liberation Day where he waved around some physical spreadsheets, which obviously caught my eye. And watching the footage, I'm like, it looks like the second column is just half the first column, but with a floor of 10%. So of course I went and found them online, put them into an actual spreadsheet, put in a formula, and yes, the second column is just half the first column, but with a minimum of 10%. I was like, that's interesting. I didn't put any further thought into where those equations come from. I'd satisfied my curiosity for the time, because the next day, the Trump administration, oh, they know how to get me. They released an equation. They're like, this is the equation of where those percentages came from. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I had a closer look at the equation, and I'm now qualified to talk you through it. This equation does indeed calculate all the values in that first column of the spreadsheet Trump was waving around, which means it represents the tariffs charged to the USA, and I quote, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. Except it doesn't. That's not what that is. This is not calculating the tariffs other countries are charging the US. This is calculating the tariffs the US would have to charge other countries in order to get trade balance. For example, last year, Australia bought from the US $34.6 billion worth of stuff. And that's US dollars, not the local dollary-doos. At the same time, the US only bought $16.7 billion worth of things from Australia. So from the US's point of view, Australia gave them more money than the US gave Australia, to the tune of a $17.6 billion trade surplus. And surplus sounds positive, just means Australia bought more things from the US than it sold. Now, New Zealand is the other way around. Very similar country, I would say, not everyone would. And Australia bought from the US $4.5 billion worth of things last year. The US, however, bought $5.5 billion worth of things from New Zealand. So that means the US is running a £1.1 billion deficit, a trade deficit, which sounds bad, just means the US bought a lot of, I don't know, New Zealand wine. But let's just say hypothetically it was bad, and the US wanted to balance out its trade with New Zealand. It would need to reduce the amount it imports from New Zealand by 19.6% to get back down to parity. And that is what this equation tells you. On the left-hand side, that triangle is a delta that represents the amount of change. The tau, the T-looking thing, represents tariffs, and the I just means for one specific country. Country I. So for example, we'll stick with New Zealand for now. So this means the formula is calculating the change in tariffs the US would have to charge country I, New Zealand. And that is to achieve trade balance. On the right-hand side, we work that out. X is the amount the US is exporting to that country. M is the amount it's importing from that country. So the difference is the trade imbalance, although wrong way around. Get to that in a moment. Underneath is where it gets fun. M is still the imports, but epsilon, the E thing, that represents the elasticity of demand for the imports going into the US. And the phi symbol, that represents the price pass-through of tariffs. That's a ratio of how much of the costs are passed on. Okay, so we'll break it down with an example. Let's say the US is importing a bottle of wine from New Zealand that would normally sell for, I don't know, $100. And the reason it's $100 is tariffs are currently 0%, that's our baseline, and demand is 100%, but then tariffs go up by down to tau, let's just say 20% for argument's sake. How much is that going to change the price? Well, that depends how much of this increase passes through to the customer. That was our symbol 5 from before, some ratio. Let's say hypothetically it's a quarter, so prices go up by 5%. What's going to happen over here with demand? What's that going to be? Well, that depends how elastic demand is. That was our epsilon from before. And we could say hypothetically demand is 4 times whatever the percentage price change is. This does, of course, assume the
Okay, do we need to watch the rest of this?
elasticity of demand is linear. I looked up
It's
a much more
retarded.
complicated model from a research paper. There's your demand curve, and you've got 2 different supply curves because there's what the manufacturer are actually getting, and then there's what the consumer's seeing because of the extra tariff. Tau, we move to this point over here, and you can say it's linear, but what they've done is a bit of a oversimplification, and that's going to be a thing. But we should now just remind ourselves what we're trying to do. If you take all of your imports and subtract your exports, that's your trade deficit. If you divide that by the imports, that's the percentage imports have to go down. This is the reduction in demand required. Oh, and that's what we've just worked out here. So there's our equation. And if you move the fine epsilon under here, rearrange it like that, this is exactly what the Trump administration were using. But of course, it's much more complicated than that. The diagram I showed you before is actually from a paper that looked at what happened after Trump's 2018 tariffs. Joint publication between the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and universities Princeton and Columbia. And this is the sort of detail you want to go into when you're bringing in tariffs. Look at this analysis. It's factoring in other things like how the price is going to change relative to demand. It's looking at possible reciprocal tariffs that come in. Like this is what you should be doing when you're planning tariffs to impact your economy. This level of detail. And we know they didn't put in that detail because on the Office of the United States Trade Representative page, they give all their working out and logic behind it. And there is our equation. And there is none of the detail we would like to see for something this complicated. They do admit that actually it would be very complex. I mean, if not impossible to do exactly, and that's true. But they just don't bother. They just decide to proxy it by this equation. Now, I've seen the discussion online that maybe this was generated by ChatGPT or something like that. I can't comment on that or even the economics behind it, but I can talk about the maths of the equation. For a start, the M and X are the wrong way around. You should be subtracting exports from imports. So this, I mean, it's just technically a negative coefficient they've put in there, but also at the same time, they've said epsilon is less than 0, which mathematically is very funny because epsilon normally means something else. But in this context, maybe that means demand goes down when prices go up, and so that would kind of cancel. It's just all very odd. And there's one more thing that really bugs me.
Hey, editor Matt, can you like crop me down and move me right over so the bottom of the equation is like right there? Okay, excellent. There's these asterisks. What are they doing there? So here's the thing about an asterisk in mathematical notation. It's not how you would write multiplication. I mean, we understand it to mean multiplication, but that's because sometimes if you're using a keyboard or a number pad or something that hasn't got a multiplication sign, you use the asterisk as like a replacement to mean multiply. So actually in Excel, you'll use an asterisk to represent multiplication, but it's only really used in terms of like data entry. You use it when you're telling something to multiply. You never use it as a symbol to represent multiplication. For that we have the multiplication sign. Or some mathematicians obviously get quite lazy, so you'll see in more advanced maths, you won't use multiplication sign anymore. You just put 2 characters next to each other. Or you'll use a dot. Very rare. It's very odd to use asterisks to represent multiplication when you're typesetting maths, which is what they're doing here. They're trying to show people what the formula is. They should just have them next to each other. I don't know why they've done. It's like writing a note for someone and at the end of it drawing in the cursor. Like it's not what you do in the written version of this communication, even though it's what you might do if you're typing it in somewhere. You know, you don't like a carriage return, cursor on the next line. That's not how it works. So I don't know. It's just weird. The whole thing reeks of mathsiness, which is where you can dress something up in the trappings of mathematics to make it look more legit, make it look more earned or worked out or, important, when what you may have done is just come up with an idea and then made it look more mathsy as a way to convince people you put maybe more thought into it than you actually have.
And it gets worse. I didn't just pick the values of phi as a quarter and epsilon as 4 at random. Those are the values the Trump administration used. And if you put them together, guess what happens to 4 1/4? Boom! They're gone. That phi and epsilon cancel out. It's like they're not even in the equation. Turns out this column is just the trade deficit as a percentage of imports. That's it. It's that simple, except it's not applied consistently. And I know that because I looked up the data.
Of course, I want to check everything for myself, so I went onto the government website to get the exact import and export figures for every single country that was in those first 2 charts I put in the spreadsheet. And thankfully, each page for those countries, there's a section at the bottom which follows a very similar format. So I pasted all of those into a text document. I could have done some kind of complicated scraping things, but for 50 entries, it was quicker to just do it manually. Because the sentences had all been generated algorithmically from their data, they're all very, very similar. So I could use find and replace to take out all the common bits and turn them into tabs, which meant that I could paste them into Excel, a little bit of tidying up, and there were 4 countries I couldn't find the data for, like Serbia and Tunisia and a couple others. I then had all the data, official government data, from the same department as the equation for 46 of those countries. It means I can now go through here. This has got all the countries in the order they appear on those printed out charts. It's got the 2 numbers that were printed on the chart. I then over here have the import amounts from 2024 in US dollars and the export amounts in US dollars. I can then work out the deficit fraction, which is the percentage we need to get it down by. And over here, I've then predicted what it should be based on their formula, and next to it is what's actually on the page. And if you have a look, a lot of these are very similar. Well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Negative 17 and 10. I'm going to reorder these and sort them by that deficit fraction from smallest to largest. And down the bottom here, these are the countries where the US is running a trade deficit. And as you can see down here, it matches perfectly. It's often off by 1%, but not always in the same direction. So there's some rounding going on somewhere. That's fine. But down here...
Okay, it's retarded. We got it.
And the nuclear button, what does this do kind of thing? That makes me more nervous.
The key to building a business, the team of the best players wins. Greatness is in the agency of others. Do you know these ass clowns? Do you know where they came up with the formula for their tariffs?
Oh, more talking about this. Okay.
You type in tariff, give me a tariff that it levels up our trade debt, which is a stupid, you want a trade deficit. But if you ask the question, put in place tariffs against every nation based on bringing equilibrium to our trade deficit.
Man, we're all talking about this.
ChatGPT, you come back with the exact formulas they came up with. Their economic advisors are fucking turning to ChatGPT. Let's go to your second question, what to do as an investor. This is what you do. Nothing. And that is whether it's whether you're getting a divorce, whether you lose someone you love, whether you get fired, you do not make big life decisions in the midst of emotional trauma because you are not thinking straight. In addition, tomorrow morning he could announce, say you sell all your stocks today, he could announce tomorrow morning that he's removing all tariffs. He's capable of doing that. And the markets could rip up 2,000 points. And then what happens to your mental health? When you sold at the bottom, probably the worst piece of financial advice given in media was when Jim Cramer, who I don't think he's malice. I think he's a good guy trying to do the right thing. He told investors at the very bottom, if you don't like this volatility, you should sell your stocks. Within 14 months, we had recovered all of our losses. If you sold when Jim Cramer suggested you might want to think about getting out, you saw your net worth cut in half. And even more damaging to your financial well-being was your mental well-being, because you saw everybody else get back exactly where they were, and you were the idiot that sold at the bottom. This is what I'm doing. Since Q4 of last year, I just look at the S&P. It's trading Apple's trading at 38 times earnings and it's not growing. I have been selling down U.S. stocks, and I have been diversifying into Latin American and European and some Asian stocks.
Okay, we've heard this before. Oh, did they redelay the TikTok ban?
Trump delayed the ban on TikTok for 75 days for a second time. How ridiculous. A deal for the sale was reportedly closed until Trump made his tariffs announcement, causing China to pull out of the negotiations, obviously. Oracle, Blackstone, and Andreessen Horowitz, all friends of Donald Trump, were reportedly involved. Trump has previously suggested he could lessen tariffs on China in exchange for a deal. I'm sure China is just thrilled to hear that. I don't know why China would do anything. Like, maybe they will if they want. I don't know why you would do anything. Let's do a very brief thing about this, because it's I think it's just going to sit there in limbo and just bump along, right? There's no deal here. They're going to try to bring it under 20%. I think that's the amount, the ownership of China for the Chinese government or Chinese investors.
Yeah. Well, you go first here. What are your thoughts?
I don't know what's going to happen here. It feels like a story from the 1980s too. I mean, I think eventually it'll have some convoluted thing that's not going to make a difference or keep us safer in any way. I think they need to make a case of why it is dangerous. I sort of like the law, but I didn't feel I made their case. And at the same time, I'm absolutely certain the Chinese are manipulating it. Like, I don't even feel like that. So I think it's eventually a dwindling company, right? It will, like, over time, if it's not focusing on this product. I'm in this new zone, Scott, of like, the reason things fail is because products suck. Like, that's, and maybe because I had lunch. What? I'm sorry?
Well, the 45 to 95 was the brand era, but digital unlock around product is the new bomb again. It sounds
I'm like, if Tesla made great cars, people would still buy them, even though he's
and
a
no
joke.
advertising. And they don't advertise.
Right. I really do think that. I'm thinking myself, I use Amazon. I don't want to use it because I'm really irritated by Jeff Bezos, but it's a great product and it's really hard. Like, I think if it gets the ball
I feel using Starlink to call you on FaceTime.
I know. I think it's just really, I think the problems that this will suffer as a product because of all this mishmash.
Yeah, he'd be banned at DGG chat.
I don't feel kids talk. I mean, they're going to move on to the next thing. That's what I feel like. And eventually they'll come up with some convoluted way where Mark Andreessen gets even richer than he already is and more toxic. And it won't make any sense. It won't protect Americans better. And China will continue to dump it. I mean, just to me, all of this has been a gimme to China. Just one big gimme to a government that does not want us to dominate.
So as it relates to TikTok, I just don't think we would ever let CBS, NBC, and ABC be owned by the Kremlin in the 60s. I think it's fucking insane to have TikTok. I think we're raising a generation of civic, military, and business leaders who hate America. 50% of people our age feel good about America, 1 in 10 young people. And I might even be wrong. But just from a trade symmetry standpoint, there are no media companies in China, and we can't afford to have this. The average 14-year-old boy in America is spending 17 hours on a media platform controlled by the CCP. It's just not a good idea.
No.
So it should be banned. Now, the second thing, and this goes back to the notion that you can't outrun multiple contraction, which we're about to incur the mother of all multiple contraction, is remember when Trump hated TikTok? And then remember when President Biden had a bipartisan law passed? And none of it fucking means anything anymore.
Doesn't.
Because if one of the largest donors of the Trump campaign, Jeffrey Yass, who also happens to be an investor in TikTok, and a bunch of crypto bros and Silicon Valley bros are also investors, he can do all this bullshit. I'm in, I'm out. I'm your girlfriend, I'm not your girlfriend. I want to break up, I don't want to break up. Why would anyone take us seriously? Why would?
So ridiculous.
Why, China is like, yeah, fine. China's not going to back down to the U.S. unless they can figure out a way, unless they have all sorts of assets, which is Latin for spies, within Oracle, and they feel like they can keep the asset in the U.S. as an espionage and propaganda tool and have their cake and eat it too, they're just going to play slow ball because this guy will change his mind next week. Or maybe General Atlantic Partners or Sequoia Capital, who would have sex with their sisters for a nickel, will put pressure on Trump and offer him.
What do you want now? I knew you'd bring in White Lotus, but go ahead.
Well, that's unfair. They'd fuck their mothers for a nickel. I think that's more accurate. Anyways, these folks now run the White House. And so this is, TikTok just sort of represents, one, a national security threat that we just don't take seriously because our kids like it and we don't understand it. And I remember when you took me to the White House, I remember thinking, and they were like, oh, we're not on TikTok. I'm like, that's a bad idea. You don't realize what's going on.
Yeah.
You don't see what's happening to our kids here. Your kid can see a beheading and then a dance video and then something showing, viewpoints on Hamas and Israel or viewpoints, a bunch of people like, I'm even part of it. I see my angriest videos get the most play on TikTok.
Yeah.
They get dialed up. And that's not just TikTok, it's everything else. But why on earth would we allow missiles to be planted on an island, Cuba, 60 miles offshore of the U.S. coast, even if they claim they will never use them against us? Like, no, we're just not going to put up with that. And then again, it's the inconsistency that's going to take our prosperity.
Does it matter because we're giving them advantage in this tariff thing? Now we give them an even bigger thing. Like,
biggest winner here.
Winner chicken dinner, China. And they were really
Hands
losing.
down.
They were really losing.
Biggest winner out of all this, hands down. All of a sudden, Canada's like, Chinese are buying up all the real estate in Vancouver.
Yeah.
This is what every Chinese
friend.
diplomat and businessman is working. I've done a lot of business in China. They're all working overtime, and they're going to European capitals. They're going everywhere and saying, they may say, you may not agree with us, but you know what? We're good partners.
Lifeline for China. This has been such a gift to China. Anyway, that's our feelings. It's a conspiracy.
It's an unbelievable gift of Vice President Xi.
She, absolutely. All right, Scott, one more quick break. We'll be back for wins and fails. Okay, Scott, we're going to do wins and fails. I think I shall go first. I think a win. I love a protest. I thought these hands-off protests were every city was full. I love seeing them in Turkey. I love people turning out. I don't know if they work or not, but DC and New York, 100,000 attendees each. Amanda went down. I did not. And average people, it was not like the professional protesters that you might see. Themes were administration's attacks on Social Security, the layoffs, deportations. Elon Musk, of course. I love the signs. They make me laugh. IKEA has better cabinets. It's funny, they really do. Wisconsin hates Elon so much it could be one of his kids. Abort unwanted presidencies, and now we're all the couch now. Trump, of course, spent the weekend golfing. I mean, just the visuals couldn't be any better. And I kind of just like it. It gets people emboldened. I don't know if protests matter, but this one had a real momentum feel, which is nice. And we'll see if that matters or not. For the fail, it's so obvious. 60 Minutes, which is, people talk about the decline of traditional media. People who do real reporting, really, we owe them a debt of gratitude. They did a story on Sunday on Venezuelan migrants who got deported to prison in El Salvador, and the reporting found no criminal records for 75% of those migrants. These people were taken off the street, many of them with legally here, and put in a prison. It's literally like just a movie. It's a movie. It feels like a movie. This is so cruel. And the people who are doing this to people and putting people in prison without any criminal record and sending them to another country they're not even from, I hope they go to jail themselves at some point. And pretending they can't take them back. I cannot. This is grotesque in every single way. Grotesque. So it's like such an embarrassment. And people aren't paying attention to it because of all this stuff about the tariffs and the stock market. But boy, what a human rights disaster for us, our country. We have no ability to say we're a good people if we're doing things like that.
I like both of those. I'm an ageist. I think all of these old people need to go away. I think that Biden's inability and the people around him, their lack of backbone to acknowledge that biology always wins is, if we've decided the prefrontal cortex of a 34-year-old is too immature to have that person have access to nuclear weapons, and for God's sakes, an 80-year-old shouldn't have their finger on the button. And my win is the market is responding. Democrat, I think it's Saikat Chakrabarti, who was the comms director for 35-year-old former boss, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has decided that he's going to challenge Rep. Nancy Pelosi, or he did challenge her.
Wait, how is Nancy Pelosi still going to be running again? When is she gone? How old is she? What?
Barty, 39-year-old software engineer turned political operative. I like seeing young people rising to the challenge. In Los Angeles, 37-year-old Jake Rakoff announced last week that he was running for the seat of his former boss, Rep. Brad Sherman, who's 70. Representative Sherman, you serve your country well. Now collect a gold watch and go play fucking golf. You're too old. In Michigan, State Senator Mallory
Didn't you used to love Pelosi?
McMorrow, 38,
yes, but now she's betrayed by
Senate seat by
Queen
talking about
AOC, so now we hate Pelosi.
I mean, there are young people stepping up here. In Illinois,
I saw her at MSNBC. I was on Jen Psaki's show on Sunday, and I ran into Mallory. She's really impressive.
Very impressive. And in Illinois, Kat Abugazala. That's the problem with all these young names. Their names are too fucking complicated. Change your name to like Smith. Just old. Change your name to that too. You'll get more votes. You'll get more votes.
Oh my God.
Anyways, Kat, I like that. That's what I'm called, Rep. Kat. Okay. Rep. Jan Schakowsky. What's with these people?
Oh my God, really? You're not doing this.
Oh wait,
go ahead.
She's running for the seat of Rep. Jan Schakowsky, who was 80. Go home.
Oh yeah, she's an influencer. But yeah.
Go home, Rep. Jan Schakowsky. 80. Yeah. Go.
Good congressperson,
home.
Let me say, for many years. But
okay, so
I agree, honey.
Senator
I'm out
Schumer,
of here.
Senator
10
Schumer,
years.
you're 74. Someone
Right.
this weekend offered me $10 million if I put in $10 million to run for president. I'm like, I'm too fucking old. You need someone who's
Yeah.
going to work 19.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton slept 5 hours a night for 8 years.
Wait, how old
Because
is
he was in his
Scott?
40s.
Old people. Old
Okay,
people.
we need my win is young people stepping up to the plate. If you're,
Yeah.
and I always like to put action behind the word, if you're a young
DGGR.
moderate running against someone who just is only there because they're a fucking incumbent, email me, Scott@stern.nyu,
he's
and I'm
60?
in. I'm
Damn.
in for the maximum campaign contribution. I'm voting for youth and new ideas and vigor. Okay, my fail is the following.
Oh, all right. Okay. Go ahead.
On Thursday and Friday, I lost, I don't know, somewhere between $6 and $8 million.
Base.
I got some of it back as I shorted AI stocks, so I probably lost $45 million. That's the bad news. The good news is I am so blessed and privileged because of the underpinnings of an America that offers prosperity, offers opportunities to the children of single immigrant mothers who live and die to secretary, rule of law, great entrepreneurial culture. It really doesn't matter. I'm fine. I know it matters to a lot of people. I'm knowing flexing and bragging about my wealth, but it does have a point. My disappointment is that, okay, we now live in a nation where we've decided to side with autocrats, not democracies pushing back on autocrats. We now live in a nation where it's possible that you can go to jail if you don't narc on someone who is planning to get an abortion. We live in a country where it is feasible, where a 14-year-old who is raped has to carry her child to term. We live in a country where a woman could die of sepsis in an emergency room parking lot because she's bleeding out because the medical professionals are too scared to perform a necessary
already
abortion.
happened
We live
at
in a
least
country
once in Texas.
where we now have a president who's
Not
opened a
good.
Swiss banking account where anyone can put money in exchange for political favors and not have to disclose it. That is the country we are in. And here's what money
You
has
left
done.
out law firms, but go ahead.
And we can
my God,
intimidate
that
law
one thing,
firms
yeah, true.
into agreeing not to represent the president's adversaries. I mean, that's the whole point of it. That's the whole fucking point of our legal system. Paul Weiss, go fuck yourself. Jesus Christ. Don't call yourself, you should never call yourself an American law firm. Your headquarters is fucking Moscow meets Mar-a-Lago. What cowards. And by the way, guest speaker, Bob Iger. That's the country we're in. And where do people turn up? Where do people decide, that's it, we have to go to Mar-a-Lago? Is when the markets are down 10%. Well, guess what? That's about number 30 on my fucking list of what terrible things have happened to this country. So look, I'll take it. I'll take it. But when it's all about the markets and not about people's rights, not about humanity, not about coarseness and cruelty, not about the whole point of a constitution, the whole point of a democracy is you protect the lower 50. You and I are going to be just fine. And I understand your concerns about your family. I think those are real concerns. The majority of people in the top 1%, we're going to be fine. The whole point of a constitution and a democracy is you have to protect the bottom 50. And what is all of a sudden the red line? The NASDAQ is down.
I know.
That's what has people
That's why I
wild.
was like, Bill Ackman, go fuck yourself.
That's the red line.
That's the red line.
Right?
That's the red line. Yep.
Oh,
All right.
We're okay with murderous autocrats and 14-year-olds carrying babies to term, but if the NASDAQ goes down,
I love this liberal
that's too
stocks.
much. You
I
know
love
what?
this liberal. I'm gonna
On Thursday and Friday, the market's
Get a
going down.
train.
I could give a flying fuck. I'll take the.
Did you see the Lex tweet about Sam Harris with Elon in the comments? No, but what did Elon never paid that bet, right? Did they actually make that bet? Sam Harris and Elon Musk made a bet. It was $1 million versus like $1,000 bottle of wine, having to do with whether or not there would be 30,000 deaths from COVID. With Sam Harris obviously taking the side that there would be at least 30,000 deaths. That was the bet. And I think that was the end of Sam Harris's and Elon Musk's friendship. Because Sam Harris had just become so unhinged about everything. Oh, was it just cases? Oh, it was 30,000 cases, not even deaths. So it was an even stupider bet from Elon Musk. In the USA, not in the world. I think it was in the USA. Good times. Okay. I think we're going to... We've got not good memes. I guess it's kind of expected, but like... I've just been getting link shit from Asmongold's subreddit. This needs to stop. Felon drug addict ODs on fentanyl. Wall-to-wall media coverage for months on end. American cities burned to the ground for George Floyd. White student killed over a parking spot. Zero media. Not a single fire started or protest planned. I think the big deal was, regardless of how you agreed, like, you know, whether or not the facts played out in whatever way you agreed or disagreed with, obviously the big deal was George was killed by police, and people's perceptions was that there wouldn't be justice, not that it was a black guy getting killed versus a white guy. I think everybody agrees that this white dude dying was bad and the person should be punished accordingly. Like, I don't know what people would be protesting about. And what's crazy is people are thinking about riding for the dude who killed the white kid because it was self-defense. It wasn't. Oh, this guy's up here at least. How retarded are people who make these memes? The white kid getting stabbed was a pretty national story, and he got stabbed at a freaking track meet, not over a parking spot. Of course, the left black community raised a crap ton of money for the kid who murdered him because of the color of his skin. That's kind of weird if people did that, but